Shadows in the Snow. Chapter 1, The Cold Routine. Tony Barlow's day always started the same way. Wake up at 4:45 a.m., brush his teeth in front of a cracked mirror, drink burnt coffee from a chipped mug, and feed the black and white stray cat that showed up every morning at his porch. He called the cat Oreo. She never came inside. Then he layered up 3 pairs of socks, thermal underwear, his garbage company uniform, and a puffy gray jacket that was more duct tape than fabric. Outside, the cold bit at his cheeks as he waited for Mark and Dave to pull up in the garbage truck. Mark drove. He was lean and quiet, always chewing gum. Dave, on the other hand, was a booming presence with a laugh so loud it could scare pigeons. They were the only friends Tony had, and truth be told, he was okay with that. They didn't ask many questions. They worked hard, cursed the cold together, and told each other the same dirty jokes over and over again. The 3 of them moved through the neighborhood like ghosts, hauling trash bins through snowbanks, waving to the occasional early riser, and stomping their feet to fight off frostbite. There was something calming about the routine. Predictable. Safe. At lunch, they parked by the lake, now frozen over. Mark passed around thermoses of soup while Dave opened a pack of cigarettes. They talked about the game, about a girl Dave was dating, about nothing important. Tony didn't say much, but he laughed in the right places. Lately though, Tony had started noticing strange things. Not loud or sudden, but quiet, subtle shifts in the world around him. A shadow that lingered too long. A voice that whispered just below the wind's howl. He told himself it was the cold, the stress, maybe the lack of sleep. But deep down, something didn't feel right. That night, he sat in his recliner with a blanket over his lap, staring into the fireplace. He didn't own a TV. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of old wood. The flames danced across the walls and for a moment, just a split second, he thought he saw something move in the reflection on the window. A shape. A face. Watching. Tony blinked. It was gone. He rubbed his eyes, stood up, and went to bed early. Oreo was curled up in her box outside. He tapped the window, but she didn't look up. He turned off the lights and lay down. The snow outside kept falling, soft and endless. And somewhere beyond the walls of his little home, the shadows stretched longer than they ever had before. Chapter 2, Flickers. The next morning started the same. But something about the sky felt off, paler than usual, almost yellow like old newspaper. Tony squinted through the window, coffee in hand, watching Oreo pace in slow circles. She hissed at something in the woods beyond the backyard, then bolted into the underbrush. That had never happened before. At work, the truck was unusually quiet. Even Dave wasn't cracking jokes. Mark kept glancing at Tony like he wanted to ask something but couldn't find the words. "You all right?" Mark finally said as they stopped near the edge of the industrial district. "You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," Tony said too quickly. "Just weird dreams." Dave climbed back onto the running board with a grunt. "We all have those this time of year. Cabin fever. Lack of sunlight. Screws with your head." Tony nodded, grateful for the excuse. Later, while hauling bags near an alley dumpster, Tony paused. There was something down the alley. A figure. Slim, hunched, back turned toward him. "Hey," Tony called. "You all right?" The figure didn't move. It just stood there, head twitching in small, jerking motions. Tony felt his stomach tighten. He blinked and the alley was empty. "Tony!" Dave shouted from the truck. "You coming or what?" Tony stumbled back, heart pounding. He didn't answer. He climbed into the cab, hands shaking. That night, the fire wouldn't light. He tried 3 matches before giving up. He bundled himself in blankets and sat on the couch, staring at the window. No shadows. No faces. But he could hear breathing. Faint, raspy breathing coming from somewhere in the house. He checked every room. Closet. Pantry. Under the sink. Nothing. He returned to the couch. Still, the breathing continued. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the coffee tasted like ash. Chapter 3: Something in the Snow. The snow was heavier now, blanketing the roads in white silence. Tony sat in the passenger seat of the truck, watching the flakes swirl under the streetlights. It felt like being trapped in a snow globe. Dave cracked a joke about a customer who had thrown away a box of porn magazines from the 80s, but Tony barely responded. His fingers were pressed against the window, fogging the glass. "Did you see it?" he asked quietly. Mark turned his head slightly. "See what?" "The man in the woods. Back near Hollow Pines." Dave scoffed. "You mean the bum that's always digging through bins?" Tony shook his head. "No. This was different. He wasn't real." Dave looked at him, then at Mark. A moment passed, heavy with unsaid things. "Tony, you sure you're getting enough sleep?" Tony didn't answer. He watched the tree line slip past the window. Just for a second, he saw eyes there. Bright. Animal. Too high off the ground to be a deer. That night, he sat in bed, unable to shut his eyes. Every creak of the house made his heart race. He kept a flashlight under the covers, flicking it on every few minutes. At 3:17 a.m., he woke up sweating, heart hammering. He could hear scratching on the back door. Not claws, fingernails. Long and slow. He crept out of bed, holding a wrench like a weapon. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. He swore the walls were pulsing, breathing. When he flung open the door, nothing. Just snow and wind. But there were prints. Not boots. Not paws. Bare feet. He didn't sleep again. Chapter 4: Breaking Points. Tony started talking less. He barely acknowledged Mark and Dave in the mornings. He began staring into nothing for long stretches of time, sometimes muttering to himself when he thought no one was listening. One day, as they drove their usual route, Mark pulled over abruptly. "Get out," he said. Tony blinked. "What?" "Take a walk. Get some air. You're scaring Dave." "I didn't do anything." "You were whispering to yourself for 20 minutes. Then you laughed like someone told a joke." "No one said anything." Tony clenched his fists. "I didn't. Just get out for 5 minutes." Tony stepped out into the snow and stood there. The wind whipped across the street. He stared down at his boots, then up at the rooftops. He thought he saw a figure crouched on a chimney, but when he blinked, it was gone. That night, the fire finally lit. But the shadows it cast were strange. They stretched across the walls in odd angles, moving when he wasn't looking. He dreamed of wolves. They circled him, eyes glowing, teeth bared. But they never lunged. They just whispered. He couldn't make out the words. He woke up screaming. Oreo was gone. Blood soaked the cabin floor, and Tony could only stare at what he had done. Again. He ran. Through the snow. Through the trees. Away from everything. The shadows followed. Whispering now in clear voices. "Coward. Killer. You'll never escape." He stumbled into a small village, desperate. He found a well and drank. The water tasted like oil, thick and putrid. He spat it out and retched. He staggered into a bakery, dripping blood and sweat, eyes wild. The baker stared. "What happened to you?" the man asked. "Wolf," Tony mumbled. "It attacked me. I killed it." The baker didn't believe him. But he handed him a crust of bread anyway and asked him to wait. Said he'd bring more. Tony saw the phone in the back room. He heard the whispered call to the sheriff. He bolted. Adrenaline burned away his hunger, thirst, and cold. He ran. Found a restaurant closed for the season. Broke a window. Hid in the walk-in freezer. The voices returned. Coward! Killer! Come out! He screamed. He cried. But when he flung the door open, there was no one there. Something inside him broke completely. He walked into the kitchen and sat down. Made a meal. Poured himself a drink. He was going to end it that night. But before he could, the sheriff's department broke in. "Freeze!" they shouted. He turned, knife in hand. The shot rang out. Tony dropped to the floor. Epilogue: The Walls Within. Tony's life had started to resemble a twisted version of the routines that once made him feel normal. He could barely remember the last time he felt whole. His days blurred into one long, sleepless stretch, each moment repeating like an old film reel that had lost its edges. The hallucinations intensified. Sometimes he saw faces in the shadows, watching him. Other times, it was the wolves, still, with eyes glowing in the dark. Their low growls echoed, vibrating in his chest. The worst were the whispers. They never stopped, always reminding him of what he had done. Always reminding him that there was no escape. He told himself it was just the stress. The isolation. The cold creeping in, eating away at his mind. But deep down, Tony knew the truth. It was all unraveling. One night, after a particularly vivid dream where he had killed Dave in a frenzy, he woke up gasping for breath, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He stared at the window for what felt like hours, the snow falling relentlessly. He could hear the voices again. The wolves. The shadows. Murderer. Run. Run, before they come for you. Tony shook his head violently. He had to get out. Get away. But where? The walls of the house felt like they were closing in. He staggered out into the night, his breath forming clouds in the icy air. The snow crunched beneath his boots, and for the first time, he thought he might actually be running from something real. Tony survived the gunshot to his stomach from the sheriff. He was stitched back together, body intact but mind shattered. He was institutionalized, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The doctors said it had gone undetected for years, that the stress, isolation, and lack of treatment had caused a complete break from reality. He would never be released. Now, his days blurred together inside four white walls. He eats, sleeps, and takes his medication. Sometimes he watches TV. Sometimes he talks to the few friends he's made inside, others like him, lost in their own minds. But at night, he still sees them. The wolves. The shadows. The whispers. He lives with them. Because if he didn't, he might kill again. Tony will never leave this place. Not in body. Not in mind. The snow never stops falling behind his eyes. And the shadows never stop moving. Not ever again.